Hi, and welcome to the lesson on Sumifs, Countifs, Averageifs. This is another step up from the Excel basic functions we did right before this, where we just looked at count, sum, min, max, and average overall. You see now, in this step, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, we understand that there are this many counts overall, this is the total number of sleep overall, but we really care about the people in the study. So we're going to have to use a slightly different formula to get to some of those answers. So you'll see what I'll start off with first is we'll start with Michelle. And we're going to set up this formula so that it can copy over and expand through the other people. And I'll show you how that works in a second. So first, one of the formulas we're going to be learning about is Countifs. So if I type in count, you see I have count A, count blank, count if, count ifs. Count if just means that you only have one criteria. Count ifs is a little more robust, so we're going to use that. Now you see here what it says is it says criteria range. Then after the comma, it's going to ask for a criteria. Same thing here if you go into the help by clicking on the little fx, you'll see the same thing happens here. We're going to do it in the function bar though, because we are pros. And so ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to do criteria range number 1. So I'm going to click on name. So you see I clicked on just the column header. It put A up there entirely. Same thing if I just want to grab the data, I can click and drag and it will populate the column and the row numbers as one cell configuration. But again, we're going to grab just the whole column A. I'm going to freeze it using F4, puts the dollar signs in front of the A. It means it's not going to move anywhere. Then it's asking for a criteria. Now, I want to count based on name. So the criteria here will actually be the person's name. So what I can do is I can just type in Michelle, in quotes, in the criteria range, close the parenthesis, and we'll say Michelle has 7 rows in this data set. But that's not really scalable. It's hard to drag this over and make it populate. So I'm going to do another trick. I'm going to have the Michelle pointed in an actual cell. So you see here in my table, I have spelled Michelle's name right on top. I click that. You see it now, it says L1. So it's going to count everything in A if it equals to whatever is in L1, which right now is Michelle. Now here's the thing, I want to drag it to the right. So I want the row to stay the same, but I want the column to move. Now if you think about how to freeze cells, this means I want the dollar sign in front of the row number, but not the column letter. So if I click F4, it freezes both. You see right here the dollar signs are around both. We're going to pay attention to the function bar for most of this lesson. Click F4 again, it freezes the row. One more time for the column, but again, I want the row, so I'm going to go back to the row. I'm going to hit enter. Same thing. So you see, just because we pointed at a cell, now it still sees Michelle, and it's going to count 7. But check this out. If I hover over the little box in the corner till it turns into a plus, and I drag it over, you see now it's still looking at A because we froze A, but it's looking at Bob right up here in M1. Same thing over here with Kenny. So let's go to the next one and do some practice. So Sumifs. Now this one's slightly different because it has to add things up. It just can't count. So it's going to ask for a sum range first. Now the sum range is the values that we want to add up. So in this case, we want to add up hours of sleep. So I'm going to freeze that. Now it's asking for a criteria range. So we're doing it by name. So I'm going to freeze name. And I'm going to look at Michelle. And we're going to click F4 until we freeze that row. So Michelle slept 56 hours. See if you drag it over, Bob slept 54, Kenny slept 37. So Michelle actually slept the most in the lesson. Kenny slept the least, which obviously means if you have children, you will never sleep again in a day of your life. Let's do one more Averageifs. So if you start typing average, you see Averageif, Averageifs. It's going to ask for the average range. Again, we want to do that in hours of sleep. I'm going to freeze that using F4. Then I'm going to grab the criteria range name. Freeze that using F4 and go up and grab this cell and just freeze the column. Close that off. There are too few arguments. So what happened here is instead of putting the comma after it, I accidentally overwrote that with my criteria. So one way to check this is to follow along right up here. It will bold the step you are on. So if I go on the other side of the column, other side of the comma, I mean, you see it goes to criteria range. If I hop back over, it goes to criteria. So I'm going to do that one more time. L1, no freaking out here. Click enter and you see Michelle slept on average 8 hours a night. If we drag it over, Bob slept 7.7 and Kenny slept 5.2. So it seems like Kenny is really going to lose this challenge because it does not look like he is sleeping nearly enough. Now one thing here, I might want to format these as numbers because some of these decimals are kind of crazy. So if you go to the home ribbon, you come over here to your formatting tools. This little comma here is going to say comma style numbers. Then I don't want decimals, so I'm going to minimize the decimals. If I want a little bit of level clarity, I can grab these down here and just increase the decimal 1. So that's how you use Sumifs, Countifs, and Averageifs. You'd notice we didn't do min-max. That's because there is no min-if or max-if. I've written many letters to Excel, but they have not gotten back to me. There are some tricks to do this, but they're a little bit more advanced for this lesson, so we will take care of those in later steps.